I'm gonna try to make this Anunnaki video again. It's not a racist against any color, because I have all races in my family, white, black, Spanish, so it's not about that. It's not about a religion. It's not about Jewish, Christianity, Buddhism, Muslim. Love them all. It's just about the Anunnaki and the people that are interested in it. I'm going to talk about it right now. And alright, here we go. I'll do it quick because this is like my third time. As you can see, this is my whole collection. I got a whole bunch of Michio Kaku books. Michio Kaku right there, right there, right there, right there, right there, right there, right there. I got a whole Michio Kaku collection. He's about the S theory, the string theory, and quantum physics. Here's the Book of Jasher and the Book of Jubilees. Here's Dead Sea Scrolls. These were found in some clay tablets. They're around 100 AD. Not these books, but they're around 100 AD. They're not in the Bible, the canon of the Bible, but these were originally back then in them. You know, those are all Sitchin books and stuff like that. I have Zachariah Sitchin. I have another thing, Slave Species of God by Michael Tellinger. Here's all Zachariah Sitchin's books. They're all messy because I already did this already. Here's the Enumilish and the Babylonian creation epic, the Atrahasis, the Kabbalion, which is the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which is a great book. The Hermes is also Ningish Zita. He just goes by different names when they were in Egypt. Here's some more Sitchin books, you know what I mean? His Gobekli Tepe, that was originally the oldest, it still is, the oldest thing known to man, period. Period. This was around 10,000 BC. There's nothing made earlier. I mean, there's clay, there's drawings on walls from cavemen, but made, stone structures made, nothing older. Civilized people around 10,000 BC, them discussing the deluge, you know, from their stone structures. Get this book. This book will teach you a lot. You know, the ancient Book of Jubilees. And here's the Enuma Elish, you know. I got the Lost Book of Enki, Chariot of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. He started. But the Enuma Elish it has the tablets. You know, there's the tablets and deciphers them. It's basically the creation epic. It's basically how the world was created, how all the worlds were created. And what's weird is back then, on one of these books, there's a picture of it. I think it's 12th Planet. I don't feel like looking for it and wasting your guys' time. And you guys probably see it too. 12th Planet is a smaller book. Oh yeah, 12th Planet. It's in one of these pages. I'm not gonna go crazy looking for it. But they had a picture of, you know, they kept Pluto as a planet. We just deleted it. But they had 12 things, you know, including the 9 planets and the sun and the moon and Nibiru. That's 12. And they had them revolving around the sun. We didn't know things revolved around the sun again until 1500 AD. They knew stuff we didn't even know, or we forgot, because they had the aliens, gods with a lowercase g, helping them understand. Now, the Enuma Elish is an amazing book because that shows how all the planets were made, and it talks about how Earthlings were made. Now, they call God the enki, en means God, ki means, you know, earth, God of the earth. Just like Enlil, his brother, was Lord of the Command, God of Command, you know. And Enki's son was Marduk. Marduk was also called Ra in Egypt and shit like that. And you know, they call the Jews and the Christians call God a plural. I forgot what the name they call him. Elohim. Elohim is plural. Means more than one God. The Elohim said, let us create man in our image and our likeness. Who are they? Who are us and who are our? You can say, oh, they were angels. Angels in Hebrew just means emissary. If I tell you who's reading that, watching this, to go tell this man to give me $1, you're my emissary. You're my angel. So they're just regular people. They're not winged beings and stuff like that. And the first successfully created human, and Eden is E.din. E means home. Din is lofty ones. That's the Sumerian language, and Eden is in Iraq, and that just was their home. And it's in the map, and it shows in the Sumerian writings before the Bible. It is in Iraq. Eden does exist, but it's not the way we were taught to think about it. Eden does exist. It is an area. It's the home of the lofty ones. It's the home of the people it's the home of Anunnaki. And they created man because they were down to earth to mine for gold, because they screwed the atmosphere up. Even with the volcanoes, it wasn't helping with the atmosphere enough. And when they came close to us and close to the sun, the radiation screwed them up. When they went far away, they got screwed up with the cold. So they needed us to mine, the Anunnaki, to mine the gold and break it down and spray it in their atmosphere and fix it. Kind of like what we do now. And you got to think, it takes 3,600 years once to go around. So of our years. So 1 year to them is 3,600 years to us. So if a fruit fly and its family lives here, a fruit fly lives 1 human day. So if it's them and their family and they talk and they look at me, they're going to be like, he's immortal. He don't age. He's been around for thousands of generations, or and it's really thousands of days. I'm not immortal. I'm not a god. I can die and I can age, but not to them and not to us. And Enki created man, and after the Anunnaki revolted, they were going to kill Enlil, but Anu came down, and Enki stepped up and said, let us create man in our image and our likeness, in their language. I'm saying it in English. And that made the Bible. That made it as Yahweh said it, God. But, it was really Enki. And he said, let us create man in our image and our likeness, to toil the yoke. Basically, to work and do the stuff the Anunnaki no longer wanted to do. And that was in the Bible. Not that exactly, but basically that was in the Bible. And they took what evolved naturally, ape man, ape woman, and put their DNA in part, their image, their DNA. And the only way they could successfully to do it is if they had female birth goddesses, Anunnaki females, because it wouldn't work inside them. It was weird. They have it in the book and all their screw ups. The first successfully created male, they called him Adamu, Adamu. And that's where they got the word Adam from. And that just means, in both languages, means man of the earth, earthling. And that's where he was created from the mud of the earth. He wasn't. He was just the first earthling, man born of the earth. And the Jews follow a calendar, still used to this day. If you read the book When Time Began, it was when Anu was visiting 3,700 BC, something around there, and Ningis decided to make a calendar and count time. So that is when time began. That's not when the world began. That's when time started being counted and recorded. And the Jews follow that to this day. That plus the time, the 2,020 years, whatever it really is, plus that's what they do. That's what year it is to the Jews, and that's when they think the world was made. But that's when the time was created. That's when time began. So it's a screw up. And if you think about the Garden of Eden, that's just an algorithm. They ate from the tree of knowing. To know your spouse means to have sex. To have sex, you can't have sex for fun. You can only do it to reproduce. Enki, Ningishita, and Enki's half-sister, who's chief medical scientist, made it to where they could reproduce on their own. That's with their DNA a little bit. And that's why when the serpent who did nothing bad, and they made him look like an evil person, a Satan, and meanwhile Lucifer just means bringer of light, knowledge, good. He didn't lie. He said, God said that if you eat from these trees, you will die. Surely you will not die. You will be like us. Don't you want to be like us? So they ate from the tree of knowing first, not of life, and it was just an algorithm. And basically, they felt nude and they put clothes on because they started feeling sexual and they started knowing their sexuality and they were able to reproduce. Just like when a horse and a mule make a donkey, or a horse and a donkey make a mule, whatever it is, it's born a hybrid. It can't reproduce. We couldn't reproduce because we were hybrids. They made it to where we could reproduce. And that pissed Enlil off. That's why when he came back to Eden and found out, oh, why are you guys hiding from me? Oh, would you eat from this thing? He got mad and said, well, what if they eat from the tree of life and then they are really like us? Then what are we going to do? And he banished them. And that's because he didn't want them to be able to live as long as they could. You know what I mean? And that's why they got banished from Eden, from where they lived. And if you look at it, back then in the Bible, we were able to live to like 1,000 years, 1,200 years, 800 years. That's when their DNA was fresh in us still. And until we started reproducing amongst ourselves and watering it down, we started living less and less and less and less, more to our own atmosphere and our own cycle of life, you know what I mean? And, they had a special fruit or stuff that they ate that can combat the stuff they were dealing with this cycle. It's all in this book. It all explains it. And they called Enki a serpent in that algorithm because he used a serpent. He used the two serpents that were like swiveling down in that shape, that exact shape. And if you look, that's the same shape as a helix, double helix of the fucking DNA. And there's usually an catechus inside of it. And medical scientists, medical people still use that to that day. Because Enki, that was Enki's symbol, and anybody in his family, because they were medical scientists. So that is just something to think about. And if you read the book, the Bible, I do got the Bible. If you read the book of Ezekiel, that's a spaceship landing. Total spaceship landing. It describes it perfectly, almost perfectly. Even Jacob says he had a dream. He's seen a fucking ladder that went up to a ship. I'm using different words, but a ship, and they were bringing stuff up and down. That was them bringing the gold up to the ship, and they were going to Mars. And if you notice, the Great Pyramids of Egypt are built at like a steep incline. And anything we invent, that's not argued that it's the oldest. The argument is the time. I think it was made around 10,000 BC, along with the Sphinx. They think it was around 3,800 BC for a false guy, and I'll tell you about that. But anything you invent, later on you should become better. They became worse. They weren't able to reproduce that. They made it at an easier incline where it, my battery is going to die. So let me plug it in so it does not die. Alright, I think I'm still good now. Alright, and I forgot what I was saying. Totally forgot. Totally lost myself. So, the pyramids. So they made what they can. Because you could not, even still to this day, with our technology, we can't make those pyramids. With all those stones, and at that incline, it'll collapse. And with the stuff inside of it and all the designs, and you can't even put a knife or a piece of paper between the stones. They're perfect with no mortar. It's ridiculous. And they made a lower passage in the other pyramids that the pharaohs made because they knew the Great Pyramids had them. Not until Napoleon conquered that area and he blew into it, did he find the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber, and that was just the name they called it. It wasn't for the king and it wasn't for the Queen, but none of the pharaohs had it because they didn't know about it. They only copied what they seen and what they knew about. So obviously those were made by the aliens, and the reason why we think it's around 3,800 BC was for certain pharaohs and shit like that is because this one guy Vianais, I think his name was, he did a hoax, and in one of the chambers, the king or the queen chambers, he wrote a graffiti in like red or something. You know, the paint was supposedly right, but it was for the king, Khufu. King Khufu. That's whose pyramid was supposedly for. But he did not know the hieroglyphs good enough. We learned it later. He misspelt it. He wrote Ra-Ufu. You wouldn't write your wrong name if you wrote it. That's the only word that was in there. So he did a obvious false thing so he could become famous because his family had money and they were rich and they were giving him tons and tons of money to become famous, become rich, and to find something. That was his way to do it. And they found him as a fraud because he said he found a king's burial and a sarcophagus and a body in it. And they later dated it later on in life. And the sarcophagus was from 200 AD, and the body was from like 500 BC. Like, it was definitely a lie. It was not from 3000 BC. It was a lie. And that was the same guy who found that information. And if you notice, all the pyramids the pharaohs made had hieroglyphs and graffiti. The Great Pyramids didn't. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's just an obvious thing. And they put all the gold they had the base up in Mars because it was hard to get the gravity in the ships up and to get the gold up there, but it was less gravity in Mars and it was easy to move. So they was able to have life in Mars back then. It's proven. It's scientifically proven. There's water in Mars, you know, and it was a bigger atmosphere. It was different, you know. But the old ruler before Anu, he got banished in Mars after Mars got a little fucked up, and he was meant to live there until he died, and his right-hand man was supposed to take care of him. And he said, other than there's obvious pyramids there that mimic the pyramids of Giza, obviously, we've seen that. There's also a face there that mimics the face of the Sphinx. The Sphinx face was supposedly Enki's son that died during the flood. You know what I mean? And he looks like us. You know what I mean? But that's what they looked like. But in one of these books, it says that guy buried the old king in a mountain, and he carved it out to look like a face of him. And then there is the face on Mars. I mean, there is weathering and shit like that. You know, we do know that. But once we get up there from Elon Musk, we're going to learn a lot more. You know what I mean? And I told you a lot, you know, the best I could, you know, with my brain injuries and not remembering it all, not reading in a while. Read that book right there, the Kabbalion. Read the Göbekli Tepe. That's the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know what I'm saying? But understand that they call the gods, the Jews and Christians, Elohim. It means more than one God. You know what I mean? Eden does exist. The pyramids do, you know, back then. Oh, yeah, but the Atrahasis is the Babylonian flood myth, because it did happen. When the planet came close around the end of the Ice Age, because we did have an Ice Age around 20,000 BC. It ended around 12 or 13,000 BC. The planet came close, and it pulled the ice sheet off the polar ice caps. And it rose the water and made a tsunami and killed most of the people. Enlil was pissed that they were able to reproduce, wanted them all to die so nobody to say nothing, and they stayed in their ships and waited, and they weren't supposed to tell nobody. But Enki told somebody, Atrahasis, a.k.a. Moses. And if you remember, when Moses was born, he was lighter skinned, he was glowing, and the father didn't think it was his kid. It wasn't his kid. It was Enki's kid, really. You know, Enki had sex with that woman, and that kid looked like him. You know what I mean? Lighter skinned, because they were darker skinned, you know, over there, you know, which it's obvious. We all know that, you know, Iraq area and stuff like that. But the Anunnaki are more lighter skinned. That's why in South America, they have like gods, bearded gods that are light and white skinned, but supposedly there weren't whiter people there until the Vikings and shit, because it blows Columbus out the water, but whatever. But you know, that's just how it goes. And and when Cain killed Abel, because they do talk about that, You know, Adamu and Tiamat, not Eve. Tiamat had a child, two children, Cain and Abel, and they talk about Seth. They talk about the same shit, but thousands of years prior. And when Cain killed Abel, supposedly he was banished to go. Oh, it sounds like to go super east, and he was like, "Oh, they'll kill me when they know I killed Cain. I mean, when they know I killed Abel." So God put a marking on him, so people would know they'd get punished 7 times bad, for doing anything wrong. Everyone's like, "Oh, it was a mark of David. There was a star on his head." That can't get passed to your siblings, because he's like, that'll get passed down to all your siblings. Not having a beard would. Messing with your DNA to not have a beard, your DNA will get passed. Mitochondrial DNA gets passed through women, and your other DNA gets passed through men. And if you go all the way east during Ice Age, you can cross the water, the Bering Sea, you have the line, you can wind up back in Americans. And the 100% Indians can't grow beards. They can't grow beards. If they are 100% Native American, they can't grow beards. And they, I believe, are the descendants of Cain. You know what I mean? They are the descendants of Cain. There's tons of other things I could say. 20 minutes is good enough. If you got other questions, I'll go into it. You know what I mean? And one day I will write down a lot of interesting facts, because the brain injury messed me up, and it's stuff I can remember and talk about. I'll probably remember tons of shit when I shut this off, but too bad. Read that poem too of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh even talks about Noah, and that's even thousands of years before the Bible. You know what I mean? And Noah was still alive. You know what I mean? And like, certain people flew in spaceships and never return. You know what I mean? Like, it's obvious. It's all obvious. Everything is Anunnaki had a part to play in our lives. Like, they built stuff that still stands to this day. Even that in Baalbek, Turkey or whatever, they have like 200,000 ton stones that aren't on the ground, that are up above other stones. You can't do that. Not even with the equipment we have. We would need billion-dollar equipment to lift those stones. There's not enough humans and ropes. It won't do it. The weight, it won't do it. And you can't even fit paper through it. It's still standing there to this day. You know what I mean? And you got to bring it miles first. And they have one that's half quarried, and there's a person sitting on it, and there's a picture, and he looks like a fly on a huge piece of ice. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I figured I'd teach you guys a little bit about the Anunnaki and about the Bible, and how, back then, they wrote the best they can, and everything was meant to stop killing, pillaging, and raping. And they wanted to show that there was an afterlife, and do good now, and your afterlife will be good. But the Anunnaki played a part. They played a part, and they do come every 3,600 years. And we do know that there is another planet. We do got proof. We just can't find it by the way the gravitational pull of all the further out planets. You know what I mean? We just can't find it yet. We will find it. If you do have questions, if you are interested, if you do want any book titles, just ask me and I'll answer. And I'll answer any questions you have. And that's it. That's the whole video. Thank you.